And we're back here. Make sure I'm not going to lose the book here. Okay, make sure I have the date. So very little life. Thing I'm going to write down for sure. Born in England on, I thought I had it remembered, April 3rd. On April 3rd, 1934. Very curious about animals, even when she was young. I'm going to say she had many pets growing up. Favorite was dog Rusty. I'm going to do just kind of growing up. I have a detail here. Loved to climb trees, to read, and just watch nature. Okay, cool. So those are some pretty big key details. Now, as you're kind of filling this out, if you can get for sure at least one key detail in each of the boxes, but 2 or 3 would be really good too. Try to get a goal of 2 for each, but for sure get something in each of them. Okay. Let's see here. Here we go. As Jane grew older, her interest in animals and faraway places grew. She loved to read stories about Tarzan and her friend Jane. She thought that she herself would be a much better Jane for Tarzan. She also read The Jungle Book, the stories of Dr. Dolittle, and stories about Africa. This is how her interest in Africa grew. She decided to see it herself one day. Back when she was a girl, it was unusual for girls to even think about doing such things, but with her mother's encouragement, Jane was determined to go. Wartime. When Jane was young, World War II was being fought around the world, including England. Jane saw warplanes, even tanks in her own neighborhood. At 11, she saw photographs of the Holocaust, a time when millions of people were killed because of their beliefs or ethnic backgrounds. These terrible images of war stayed with Jane throughout her life. Going to Africa. When Jane became an adult, she went to school to become a secretary. Her mother encouraged this too. She said that secretary skills were needed everywhere in the world. Being a secretary might give Jane an opportunity to travel. Then something exciting happened. One of Jane's friends moved to Kenya in Africa, and she asked Jane to visit her there. Jane saved her money. By the time she was 23, she had saved enough to travel to Kenya. Her dreams were beginning to come true. In Kenya, Jane got a job as a secretary in the city of Nairobi. This allowed her to support herself. Apartheid. When Jane arrived in Africa, she saw something that deeply troubled her. In some parts of Africa, the system of apartheid was used. Apartheid was an unfair and cruel system that separated people by their skin color. Apartheid wrongly said that light-skinned people were better and more important than dark-skinned people. Dark-skinned people suffered terribly under this system. Good map here of just where Kenya is in Africa. So the continent of Africa, Kenya is on the eastern coast. And Nairobi is Kenya's capital. After living in Kenya for a year, Jane learned that the well-known scientists, Dr. Lewis and Mary Leakey, were working in the nearby country of Zaire. With this news, Jane's dreams began to grow. The Leakeys were studying animals and fossils. This interested Jane very much. So what did she do? She made an appointment, saved her money, and trekked across Africa to see them. The Leakeys did most of their important work in Africa, especially the work of discovering ancient human bones. These bones have helped the Leakeys and other scientists learn about human history. Dr. Leakey may have been Jane's most important teacher and mentor. Jane talked with him about Africa and its animals. Dr. Leakey was so impressed by Jane's knowledge that he hired her right then to become his assistant. She helped him and his wife collect and study fossils. She also helped to write the reports. While Jane worked with the Leakeys, she learned all she could. Jane felt as though she was doing work that she was truly meant to do. After a few months, Dr. Leakey and Jane decided that she was ready to do a study of her own. Jane chose to study chimpanzees. To do so, Jane had to go to the jungles where they live. The journey would be difficult, but Jane was ready. However, the government of Tanzania would not let her go. They thought it was not safe for a young Englishwoman to go into the jungle on her own. With the Leakeys' help, Dr. and Mrs. Leakey helped Jane to get her start. They provided everything she needed to begin her study of the chimpanzees. Chimpanzee is a word from the Congolese language. It means like or similar to man. Jane knew that studying the chimps would be the right thing for her to do. She asked her mother for help. Jane's mother agreed to go with her. They also had a guide and plenty of supplies, so the government finally let Jane go. Jane's mother, working with the people of Tanzania. Primatologist. Jane Goodall is a primatologist. That's a person who studies primates, the species name for humans, apes, and monkeys. The chimpanzees of Gombe. Jane and her mother made their journey, finally arriving in Gombe, Tanzania. Jane was beginning to study the chimpanzees there, but the chimpanzees were afraid of Jane. Whenever she came around, they would leave. This happened for several months. Jane became discouraged. To study them, she had to sit far away and use binoculars. How could she study chimpanzees if she couldn't get near them? But one day, a chimpanzee came into Jane's camp. He began stomping and screaming. Jane realized that the chimpanzee wanted the banana that he saw inside Jane's tent. After that, she started keeping bananas in a camp for the chimpanzees. Soon, the first chimpanzee began bringing others there. Jane named this first chimpanzee David Graybeard. And David Graybeard was the first chimpanzee to make personal contact with Jane Goodall. In Gombe Stream Wildlife Research Center, this national park was formed in 1968 to protect the chimpanzees studied by Jane Goodall. It's located along the shores of Lake Tanzania. It is kept completely natural with no roads, electricity, or telephones. It's a real-life version of the Tarzan landscape that Jane loved to read about when she was a girl. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. I want all of you just to think about what we could add to our note taker when we come back.